Now, I'd like to have some views on ground from Mr. Sushil Rathi from Mahindra Logistics. Sir, as you're aware, we have been 18 months plus kind of a slowdown observed in the trucking industry. From logistics perspective, and add on to that the COVID impact, I believe the mileage pre-COVID and post-COVID scenario may be significantly different. So, keeping this in mind, from logistics perspective, what is the impact on demand for trucks you see going forward? If your thought, please.
So let's talk about the current situation. So as the the COVID incidents started increasing and the government went for the lockdown, we had twin problem. One, of course, was the trucks which were en route, and a lot of truck were stopped en route because the movement was not possible. Secondly, a lot of drivers also left. They also had this fear, and probably many of them left even the loaded trucks en route and left for their villages. So that was the additional challenge which we were facing. At the same time, since the plant operation and all other thing also came to a grinding halt, obviously there was no new demand for the transportation. So we had to kind of balance between these issues vis-a-vis then starting when the unlockdown started and the industry started working, and especially the government went into the phase one where the essential services were given a permission to start, and later on the other industry were to start. Today, when we take a stock of the situation, as of this moment, roughly 35% level of operation has come at a gross level. In some industry vertical, it may be higher. For example, in the e-commerce or the consumer vertical, etc., it is much higher. The transportation as well as the overall activity, while in many other it is at a much lower level. So gradually, I think it will improve. But today we are facing another challenge is the availability of drivers. While the activities are starting, but a lot of drivers who have left for their villages, they are not willing to come back. They are not feeling safe, confident, and they don't want to leave their families at this juncture. So that is the other challenge which, as an industry, we are facing, and we are trying to work around that, giving them that kind of confidence in terms of the facilities which will be provided, in terms of the medical screening, in terms of their health insurance, etc. So those are some of the things which are gaining momentum, and idea is to give the confidence to the drivers. Having said that, Mr. Anuj Kathuria talked about the two, three areas which impacted the demand. One, of course, he talked about the GST, and the second was the Excel load increase. But from where we sit, when we look at the requirement of our customer, they would like the logistics cost to come down. And both these initiatives, the GST as well as the Excel load increase, helped in a big way in terms of bringing down the logistics cost, which eventually the 95% benefit went back to the OEMs itself. Means I'm not only talking about the trucking OEMs, but all OEMs from where the transportation used to happen, and that helped in terms of bringing down the logistics cost, because the same capacity truck could carry maybe 15%, 20% additional load. So PTPK came down, and that helped the OEMs in terms of reducing the overall cost, which they could factor into their product cost. So from my perspective, when I look back, both these initiatives were great help. Of course, that has an impact on the truck demand. And as rightly mentioned by Mr. Anuj as well as Siddharth, is the scrappage policy, which is something I think will help and go in a big way. Idea is not only to generate the additional demand for the trucking, but I think in India we seriously need the high technology to come into place, and that is why the trucks which are running 15-year, 20-year old, if the scrappage policy comes in, and then we are going to have better quality trucks running on the roads, then it will be even safer for everyone. The number of accidents which we talk about probably can reduce. the new technology truck will be better on the fuel efficiency. They are better in terms of their maintenance cost. So it will help everyone. So I genuinely believe that the time has come for the government to seriously look into the scrappage policy and see how it can be implemented.
So, Sushil, thank you so much. You add a very important perspective to the discussion. Interestingly, uh, you feel that axle load and GST actually benefited, and it's from the supply to demand perspective, it's a completely 180-degree view. I'd like to add that while we may say that GST is causing the hindrance for new vehicle sales, our observation is that in 2016, 17, and 18, when we saw the impact of axle load and GST, we also saw a very high amount of vehicle sales. So in the same era, we also saw people buying a lot of trucks despite of higher GST. So that's also an interesting fact that while the industry pushes for lower GST, the customers did pay higher GST in 17 and 18 when we saw historical highs. Uh,
So let me
with
give you
what
the
I understand,
calculation. Okay, so what I was saying is the actually with the GST coming in, as far as we are concerned, the trucking cost, the ownership cost of the new truck actually came down because we had the the benefit of claiming the GST rebate into the cost. So the when I look back, it is not really increased the cost of the truck. And as you rightly mentioned, that is why a lot of my transporter etc. went for buying the new trucks.
the logistics segment is a great example of and very critical to bring in operational efficiencies, better cost management, and there is more opportunities to collaborate in the logistics segment. Uh, your thoughts on that, Mr. Rathi?
But in the whole life cycle, if you see the cost for the customers, when you look at it from a customer's point of view, 10% is what can be influenced maybe by the OEM and the dealership network, etc. And 90% is his operating cost over a period of 6 years when they have taken this example. Now, what are these costs and where exactly, he is not able to run his business in a profitable manner? Because if he runs his business in a profitable manner, maybe he will add a more vehicle and there'll be more demand automatically, which will come even for the commercial vehicle. Now, one of the biggest challenge, of course, is for these people because the 80% of them are small fleet owners, etc., is to find the backhaul. That is where the major cost happens. And when you will see even on the trunk routes in India, you will find when you look at Mumbai to Chennai, for example, the freight rates are X, while from Chennai it will be maybe half of that, or maybe at a 50% level, 70% level. So backhaul is one area which impacts the cost of the transporter in a big way. Now, if they have a contract on the other side, it will be good. If they don't, then either they wait and they try to figure out through the local market chain, through the broker network, etc., how to fill the return load. And that is where a lot of time is wasted. And if a truck is not running, obviously there are fixed costs, etc., and then it impacts their profitability. So that is one major thing. Second thing is the bad supply chain planning all across, whether it is at the the shipper end or the receiving end. A lot of time is wasted for a trucker in terms of loading and unloading. Many time in the FMCG we have seen there is a push sales. So the material is loaded, it goes there, and at the distributor end it is waiting for 2 days, 3 days, etc. So a lot of time is wasted in that channel. Of course, another thing which is very common in India is there are too many people in the chain. So you have the shipper, then you have the maybe 3PL supply chain player, then you have the trucking companies, then you have the brokers, and then you have the fleet owner. So because of that, also in the whole system, the cost goes up, and to the end fleet owner, the realization which he should get, he may not get effectively. Then there is a problem with the manual process, and this is like in India today, even today, majority of the companies or the shippers would like to have a physical POD of the goods delivered. And this is something which needs to now change. More so post the COVID event, one has to really see how we can do the electronic POD or online POD, rather than waiting for the physical PODs for the material shipped. One of the major reasons for a transporter to get his money late is always because he has to submit a physical POD, which maybe, truck takes a route of 1 month, comes back, and when the driver comes to office, then he deposits the POD, then they prepare the bill, send it to the company, and then get their payment. So that whole process also delays the payment cycle. Now, many of these things, if we try to attack, I think we can bring down the cost both for the shippers as well as the cost element for the trucking companies. And once they are having a lesser cost and better profitability, their overall business will be strengthened, and then they will be in a position to buy. One of the factor or one of the solution possibly for this is the looking at collaborating between the various trucking companies, or using a platform like a freight exchange kind of platform, which will help in terms of managing the reverse logistics in a far better way rather than losing money. And we actually at Mahindra Logistics, we have made several attempts in this direction. We have now collaborated, we have gone ahead and collaborated with other 3PL companies or other transporting companies. Rather than treating them as a competition, we believe that time has come, time is ripe for us to collaborate and see, if I go from Mumbai to Calcutta, can I have a load which I don't have directly with me, but through one of my partner, and in which way we can reduce the overall cost of logistics in this system. So these are some of the ways which we can actively, look at. Some of us are making that attempt, but it doesn't actually, honestly, it doesn't require a government intervention, but it requires industry to come together. And even as a part of CII Logistics Committee, we are trying to push some of this agenda so that, the user companies, the logistics user and logistics supplier, both can come together and find a common platform where some of these themes can be implemented to reduce the cost. And I strongly believe that with the COVID incident, I think the time has come where we should look more digital, more collaborative, and reduce all this waste in the system.
One question on the transporter side. Obviously, driver shortage is a very, very important issue that the industry has to address. One is a very generic one on how the industry will handle this challenge. Another one, which is more specific, is what is your view on a centralized marketplace connecting fleet operators and driver through a relay network? Do you feel a driver relay service is viable in the Indian context, Mr. Rathi?
Our driver relay service has been something which has been tried out by a couple of companies. The jury is still out whether that's a good model or not. Apparently, it did initially talked about driver going back home every day. But we have to look at the psychological aspect of the whole business also. A lot of drivers are actually attached to their particular truck, and they treat that as their home. And many of them actually are not very comfortable in terms of managing a different truck every time. So there is a lot of discussion which has happened. Many companies have adopted that model. Many are not going for that. And there is no clarity as of this moment whether that is good or bad. Worldwide also, if you see, not many countries have adopted that kind of model. Typically, a particular driver is attached to his truck, and many a time, because there is a owner driver concept also in many countries, where the truck owner himself is the driver also. So having said that, whether one finds a great benefit in that, again, I'm saying the jury is yet to be out on that, and there's no clarity in terms of whether it's a good scheme or not. Important point about the one of the key stakeholder, which is driver. And while we all talk about the driver training, etc., but I think unless we give him that status in our society, what they deserve, till that time, this problem of driver shortage will never go away. But today, a driver doesn't want his son or daughter to come into this field. They would rather ask them to, be a doctor, engineer, or do something else. The only reason is because there is always a social stigma attached with that, if you're a driver. So I think another interesting thing which he talked about is uh, this is not something which is the job of only OEM or somebody else. I think the whole industry, whether it is the fleet operator, whether it is the third party logistics like us or the OEM, everybody will have to come together to make sure that we give them that required status in the society, make them that their job is so important. And in that direction, for example, some of the activities which we do is we do what we call as a chai pe charcha. Every week, the plant heads and the other operation heads are required to sit with 5 drivers or 10 drivers over a cup of tea just to understand their challenges, their problems, and give them that status that they can sit in front of my manager on a chair and discuss freely these kind of things. But one of the area which is lacking and where probably industry has to seriously look into is the creating facilities for driver near their plants, because many time in large plants, etc., there are not enough facilities for the driver, and they need to wait there before unloading, etc. There are no toilet, there are no other facility. So if those facilities also can be created, it will be a very humane thing to do, really. And I think we all actually have to work in that direction to make it happen.
How do you think the dynamics of digital supply chain can leverage the benefits of the TCO model, the total cost of ownership, in logistics spent by customers?
So as I mentioned even earlier, for example, when you look at all the manual processes today in the transportation industry, uh, if those can be eliminated and we can move to, let's say, EPOD, etc., this will help both. It will help a great deal to the transport companies, and thereby, the cost which they factor in for the delayed payment, etc., can be reduced and can be passed on to the end customers. Secondly, the larger issue which is around today, or the majority of the cost which is attached to, is the backhaul opportunity. If we don't have the backhaul opportunity today, then the cost for the trucking company increases, and eventually, in some form or manner, they load it to the shipping companies. So that is where I think a lot work can be done. Some work has already started. For example, some digital platforms have already come, which is connecting the buyer and the suppliers both. And there is more work which can be done in the aggregation of these kind of demands, and finding out how we can convert a lot of one-way routes into a two-way routes by which we can fly a dedicated vehicle at a reduced cost. So that is where I think companies like us also working very actively in terms of defining how do we optimize cost for our end customer. And eventually, when the wheels continuously roll, even for the truck owner, he is also benefited because his fixed costs are already defined. So by doing the more running, and one of the metrics which we track for many of these our transport partners are in terms of what kilometer they do every month. And that is where a lot of waste is there, whether it is the waiting for load, whether it is waiting for loading, unloading, whether it is waiting for backhaul, etc. If all those things can be cut down, vehicle can be optimized in a much better way, and the both the entities can share that benefit, which is the truck owner as well as the shipping companies.